Sarah Hayes was not your average soldier. She stood out, not because she wore a uniform, but because of the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. Her two constant companions, Titan and Luna, were no ordinary dogs either. Trained Belgian Malinois, they moved like shadows beside her, their sharp eyes always scanning, their ears perked for the slightest sound. Together, the trio had become an unstoppable team in the military. One day, Sarah was handed a new assignment. It wasn't glamorous or exciting. It was dangerous. She was tasked with patrolling a remote stretch of land where reports of illegal activity had been surfacing. The area was known to attract troublemakers, especially biker gangs who thought they owned the roads. While Sarah wasn't thrilled about leaving her usual duties behind, she knew this was part of the job. Besides, she trusted Titan and Luna to have her back no matter what. The first morning of her patrol started off uneventfully. Sarah drove her truck along winding country roads, her dogs sitting alertly in the passenger seat. They passed by open fields and dense woods, the air crisp and fresh. But soon enough, things took a turn when she pulled into a small roadside diner for a quick coffee break. That's when she met them. A group of bikers lounged outside the diner, their loud voices carrying across the parking lot. Their leather jackets gleamed under the sun, patches stitched onto them that hinted at a life far removed from lawfulness. Razor, the leader of the pack, leaned casually against his massive motorcycle, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He was tall and muscular, exuding an intimidating presence. When he spotted Sarah stepping out of her truck, his grin widened. Well, Razor drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. What do we have here? The little lady playing soldier. His friends erupted into laughter, exchanging amused glances as if Sarah's very existence was some kind of joke. Sarah ignored them and walked toward the diner, her boots crunching against the gravel. But Razor wasn't done yet. You lost, sweetheart. He called after her, his tone patronizing. Or are you just looking for attention? Sarah stopped mid-step, turning to face him. Her expression remained calm, though inside her jaw tightened. She'd faced disrespect before. Being one of the few women in her field meant she'd heard it all. Still, something about Razor's arrogance grated on her nerves. Without saying a word, she turned back around and entered the diner, her dogs trotting faithfully behind her. Inside, she ordered her coffee and took a seat near the window, watching the bikers through the glass. Titan rested his head on her foot, while Luma sat upright, her gaze fixed on the noisy group outside. Even though Sarah tried to focus on her task ahead, she couldn't shake off the feeling that these men weren't going to let her be. And deep down, she wondered if their taunts would escalate into something more serious. As she sipped her coffee, Sarah reminded herself why she was there: to do her duty, protect her country, and prove that strength isn't defined by gender. Little did she know, her resolve would soon be tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. The next few days turned into a pattern Sarah hadn't anticipated. Every time she drove her truck along the rural roads, Razor and his gang seemed to appear out of nowhere. Their loud motorcycles roared like thunder, drowning out the peaceful hum of nature. At first, it was just their presence, menacing and deliberate. But soon, the taunts began again. "Hey, soldier girl," Razor would shout, his voice cutting through the quiet countryside. Still playing pretend. His friends laughed as if it were the funniest thing they'd ever heard, their laughter echoing off the trees. Sarah kept her eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel tighter, but refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Titan and Luna sat silently beside her, their ears swiveling toward the noise, sensing her tension. But Razor wasn't content with mere words. He and his crew started making things personal. One afternoon, as Sarah slowed down near a checkpoint, one of the bikers revved his engine dangerously close to her truck. The sudden noise startled Luna, who let out a low growl. Another biker threw an empty beer can at her windshield, leaving a sticky trail as it bounced off. Sarah's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to lose control. not when she was outnumbered. Each encounter chipped away at her patience. It wasn't just about the insults anymore. It was the disrespect. For her dogs, and for the work she did every day to keep people safe. Sarah knew better than to engage directly. These men thrived on chaos and conflict, and giving them what they wanted would only make things worse. Still, the constant harassment weighed heavily on her mind. One evening, after another long day of patrolling, Sarah stopped at the same roadside diner where she'd first met Razor. She hoped for a quiet meal, maybe even a moment to collect her thoughts. But as fate would have it, Razor and his gang were already there, lounging outside as if they owned the place. They spotted her immediately, their smirks widening as she stepped out of her truck. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," Razor said, stepping closer. His tone was mocking, but there was something sharper beneath it. A challenge. "You really think those dogs are enough to protect you out here?" Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she walked past him, her boots clicking against the pavement. Titan and Luna followed closely, their bodies tense and ready. Razor blocked her path, his shadow looming over her. For a split second, Sarah felt a flicker of unease, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had faced tougher situations before, and she wasn't going to back down now. "I'm not here to play games," Sarah finally said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "If you've got a problem with me doing my job, take it up with someone who cares." Razor chuckled, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, we'll take it up with you. All right. Just wait." His words lingered in the air as Sarah entered the diner, her heart pounding. She ordered her food and sat by the window, watching the bikers through the glass. Titan rested his head on her lap, while Luna stayed alert, her golden eyes fixed on the group outside. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Razor's threat wasn't empty, that this was far from over. As she ate, Sarah replayed the encounters in her mind. She knew she couldn't ignore the situation forever. Razor and his gang weren't just annoying. They were dangerous. And if she didn't handle this carefully, it could escalate into something much bigger. For now, though, she focused on staying vigilant, trusting her instincts, and relying on the unwavering loyalty of her dogs. Whatever came next, she was determined to face it head-on. The days that followed only grew more tense. Razor and his gang seemed to take perverse pleasure in making Sarah's life difficult. Every time she drove her truck along the winding roads, they appeared, their motorcycles roaring like a pack of wild animals. They'd ride dangerously close to her vehicle, weaving in and out as if daring her to react. One of them even leaned over and slapped the side of her truck with a loud thud, startling Titan, who barked sharply in response. Luna growled low in her throat, her body rigid with tension. Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. She hated feeling cornered, but she knew better than to rise to their bait. These men weren't just reckless. They were calculated. They wanted her to lose her cool, to give them an excuse to escalate things further. And Sarah wasn't about to hand them that satisfaction. Still, the constant harassment gnawed at her resolve. It wasn't just the noise or the danger. It was the blatant disrespect. They didn't see her as a soldier doing her duty. They saw her as someone weak, someone easy to intimidate. The thought burned inside her like a slow fire. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah decided to stop at the diner again. She figured the bikers would be long gone by now, off causing trouble elsewhere. But as she pulled into the parking lot, her heart sank. There they were, gathered around their bikes, laughing and drinking like they owned the place. Razor spotted her immediately, raising his beer can in mock salute. "Back for more, soldier girl," he called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. His friends joined in, hooting and jeering, as if it were some kind of sport. Sarah ignored them, stepping out of her truck with deliberate calm. Titan and Luna flanked her, their presence a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. But Razor wasn't done yet. "You're either brave or stupid," he said, stepping closer. "Either way, you don't belong here. This is our turf." Sarah met his gaze, refusing to look away. "I'm not here to pick a fight," she said evenly. "But I'm not leaving either. If you've got a problem with me doing my job, that's your issue, not mine." Razor smirked, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, we've got a problem, all right. And trust me, you'll regret sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." His words sent a chill down Sarah's spine, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she turned and walked toward the diner, her dogs following closely. Inside, she ordered her food and took a seat by the window, watching the bikers through the glass. Titan rested his head on her foot, while Luna stayed alert, her sharp eyes never leaving the group outside. As she ate, Sarah replayed Razor's threat in her mind. She couldn't ignore the fact that these men were growing bolder and more dangerous with each passing day. Their actions weren't just annoying. They were a clear warning. Something bigger was brewing beneath the surface, and Sarah had no doubt that Razor and his gang were involved in something illegal. Smuggling, weapons trafficking. Whatever it was, they weren't going to stop until she backed off, or worse. For now, though, Sarah focused on staying one step ahead. She reviewed her patrol routes, making mental notes of areas where the bikers often gathered. She also reached out to local law enforcement, sharing what she'd observed so far. While she doubted they could do much without solid evidence, every bit of information helped. Back at base later that night, Sarah spent extra time training with Titan and Luna. She ran drills, sharpening their skills in obedience and protection. The bond between them was unbreakable, built on years of trust and teamwork. As she watched them move with precision and purpose, Sarah felt a surge of determination. Razor and his gang might think they were untouchable, but they had no idea who, or what, they were dealing with. Sarah knew she couldn't face Razor and his gang alone, not with their numbers and arrogance working against her. She needed to be smarter, sharper, and more prepared than ever before. That night, after returning to base, she pored over every detail she had gathered about the bikers. She reviewed surveillance footage from her truck's dashboard camera, studying their movements and patterns. It didn't take long for her to notice something unusual. The bikers always seemed to gather near an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building was a crumbling relic of another era, its windows boarded up, and its walls covered in graffiti. To most people, it looked like nothing more than a forgotten structure, but Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. The bikers' frequent visits suggested it was more than just a hangout spot. It was likely tied to whatever illegal activities they were involved in. Sarah made a mental note to investigate further, knowing this could be her chance to catch them red-handed. The next morning, Sarah arrived early at the training grounds to work with Titan and Luna. She put them through rigorous exercises designed to test their speed, agility, and obedience. They practiced tactical maneuvers, including how to flank suspects and neutralize threats without causing harm. Sarah watched with pride as her dogs executed each command flawlessly, their movements fluid and precise. There was no doubt in her mind that Titan and Luna were ready for anything, even a confrontation with Razor's crew. Later that day, Sarah met with her commanding officer to discuss her findings. She explained the situation carefully, emphasizing the escalating harassment and the suspicious activity around the warehouse. Her CO listened intently, nodding as she laid out her plan. He reminded her to stay cautious, reminding her that Razor and his gang were unpredictable and dangerous. But he also gave her the green light to proceed, trusting her judgment and skills. Armed with new resolve, Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for what lay ahead. She double-checked her equipment, ensuring everything was in perfect condition. She cleaned her boots, polished her badge, and inspected her truck to make sure it was ready for rough terrain. Most importantly, she spent time with Titan and Luna, reinforcing their bond. She spoke softly to them, praising their loyalty and strength. "We're a team," she told them, scratching behind Titan's ears and rubbing Luna's chest, "and we'll get through this together." As night fell, Sarah climbed into her truck, her dogs settling into their usual spots beside her. The air was cool and still, the kind of quiet that felt heavy with anticipation. She drove slowly along the darkened roads, her headlights cutting through the shadows. Her mind raced with possibilities. What if Razor and his gang tried to ambush her? What if she walked straight into a trap? But fear wasn't an option. She had trained for moments like this, and so had Titan and Luna. When she reached the edge of the woods near the warehouse, Sarah parked her truck out of sight and turned off the engine. She sat there for a moment, listening to the faint hum of crickets and the distant rumble of motorcycles. She glanced at Titan and Luna, who were already alert, their bodies tense and ready. Taking a deep breath, Sarah grabbed her flashlight and stepped out of the truck. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. She signaled for Titan and Luna to follow her, their paws padding silently against the dirt path. As they approached the warehouse, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She could hear voices now, muffled but distinct, coming from inside the building. Peering through a crack in the boards, she saw exactly what she feared. Crates stacked high, men loading goods into trucks, and Razor standing nearby, barking orders. Her grip tightened on her flashlight, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew she couldn't storm in blindly. Not yet. She needed backup, but she also needed proof. Quietly, she pulled out her phone and began recording, capturing everything she could see. Titan and Luna stayed close, their presence a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone. For now, Sarah held her position, watching and waiting. Whatever happened next, she was ready. Razor and his gang had underestimated her once too often, and soon they would learn the hard way just how capable she and her dogs really were. The night was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hum of crickets. Sarah crouched behind a cluster of bushes near the abandoned warehouse, her heart pounding but her mind razor-sharp. Titan and Luna stayed close, their bodies low to the ground, their eyes scanning the area with the same precision that had been drilled into them through years of training. She could feel their energy, their readiness to act at her command. It was a comforting thought as she peered through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, observing the scene inside. Inside the warehouse, Razor and his gang were hard at work. Men moved crates back and forth, loading them onto trucks parked haphazardly outside. The faint glow of lanterns illuminated their faces, faces hardened by years of living on the edge of the law. Razor stood near the center of the chaos, barking orders like a general overseeing his troops. His voice carried through the thin walls, harsh and commanding. Sarah's jaw tightened as she realized just how deep their operation ran. This wasn't some petty smuggling ring. It was organized, calculated, and dangerous. Sarah knew she couldn't handle this alone. She needed backup, but calling for reinforcements would take time. Time she didn't have if Razor noticed her presence. Her fingers hovered over her radio, hesitating. Just then, one of the bikers stepped outside, lighting a cigarette as he leaned against the wall. His gaze swept lazily across the surrounding area, completely unaware of Sarah hiding just a few feet away. Titan let out a soft growl, low enough not to carry but loud enough to remind Sarah of the stakes. She signaled silently to her dogs, pressing a finger to her lips to keep them still. They obeyed instantly, their discipline unwavering even in the face of danger. For now, they were invisible, mere shadows blending into the darkness. But Sarah knew that wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, someone would spot her, or worse, try to corner her. And when that happened, she'd need to be ready. Her moment came sooner than expected. As she shifted slightly to get a better view, a dry twig snapped beneath her boot. The sound was barely audible, but in the dead silence of the night, it might as well have been a gunshot. The biker outside froze, his cigarette dangling forgotten from his lips. Slowly, he turned his head toward the bushes where Sarah hid. His hand reached for something tucked into his belt, a knife glinting faintly in the moonlight. "Hey," he shouted, stepping forward. "Who's there?" Sarah didn't hesitate. She rose from her hiding spot, her flashlight cutting through the darkness as she aimed it directly at him. The sudden burst of light startled him, giving her just enough time to shout, "Military patrol! Stand down!" But instead of complying, the man lunged at her, his knife raised. Before he could take another step, Titan sprang into action. With a speed that seemed almost supernatural, he tackled the biker to the ground, pinning him with a low, menacing growl. The man froze, his bravado crumbling under the weight of Titan's powerful frame. Behind Sarah, Luna stood guard, her teeth bared in warning as more figures emerged from the shadows. Razor appeared first, flanked by several of his men. Their motorcycles roared to life, headlights blinding Sarah momentarily as they surrounded her truck, cutting off any chance of escape. Razor's expression was a mix of fury and disbelief, his earlier arrogance replaced by cold calculation. "You really think you can mess with us?" he snarled, stepping closer. "You're outnumbered, sweetheart." Sarah stood tall, refusing to show fear. She glanced at Titan and Luna, who were already in position, their muscles coiled like springs. "I'm not alone," she replied evenly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "And neither are you." For a split second, no one moved. Then, without warning, Razor signaled his men to advance. Sarah gave the command, her voice sharp and clear. "Go." Titan and Luna exploded into motion, their movements a blur of power and precision. Titan intercepted the first biker, knocking him off balance before circling back to block another attacker. Meanwhile, Luna darted between the men, her agility unmatched as she weaved through their attempts to grab her. Each movement was deliberate, each strike calculated. The bikers, caught off guard by the ferocity of the dogs, stumbled backward, their confidence wavering. Razor watched in stunned silence as his crew fell apart under the relentless assault. What had started as a game of intimidation had quickly turned into a fight for survival. And Sarah's dogs were winning. The scene erupted into chaos as Titan and Luna moved with a speed and precision that left Razor and his gang scrambling. The bikers, who had spent their lives relying on brute strength and intimidation, were completely unprepared for the calculated ferocity of Sarah's dogs. Titan lunged at one man attempting to grab a metal pipe from the ground, pinning him down with a low growl that sent chills through the air. The biker froze, his eyes wide with fear, realizing too late that this wasn't just any dog. It was a highly trained warrior. Meanwhile, Luna darted between two others who tried to flank Sarah. Her movements were like lightning, zigzagging so fast they couldn't lay a hand on her. When one biker swung wildly at her with a fist, she ducked under his arm and circled behind him, snapping her jaws close enough to make him yelp in panic. The sound echoed through the night, adding to the growing sense of disorder among the gang. Their confidence crumbled as they realized they were outmatched, not by Sarah alone, but by the bond she shared with her dogs. Razor stood frozen for a moment, watching his crew fall apart before his eyes. His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by disbelief and anger. He shouted orders, trying to rally his men, but it was useless. No amount of yelling could counteract the sheer discipline and focus of Titan and Luna. Every time one of the bikers tried to regroup or fight back, the dogs were already there, cutting them off, neutralizing their attempts without hesitation. Sarah remained calm amidst the chaos, her training kicking in as she assessed the situation. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Enough," she commanded, not just to her dogs, but to the bikers as well. "Stay down, or things will get worse." Her words carried authority, reinforced by the sight of Titan and Luna standing guard, their teeth bared and their bodies coiled, ready to strike again if needed. One by one, the bikers dropped whatever makeshift weapons they'd been holding, pipes, knives, even a crowbar, and raised their hands in surrender. Some looked embarrassed, others seemed genuinely terrified. None dared to move as Sarah signaled her dogs to hold their positions. Even Razor, who had always prided himself on being untouchable, found himself backed into a corner. His face twisted with frustration and humiliation as he stared at Sarah, his earlier mockery replaced by grudging respect. "You win," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own heavy breathing. "Call off your beasts." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled out her radio and called for backup, her tone professional and steady. "This is Handler Hayes. I've located suspected illegal activity at coordinates Alpha 749. Request immediate assistance." As she spoke, she kept an eye on the bikers, ensuring none of them made a sudden move. Titan and Luna stayed vigilant, their unwavering focus a testament to years of trust and training. While they waited for reinforcements, Sarah took a step closer to Razor, meeting his gaze head-on. "You thought you could scare me away," she said quietly, her voice firm but measured. "But all you did was prove how weak you really are. Real strength isn't about throwing your weight around. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter how tough things get." Razor didn't reply. There was nothing he could say. For the first time in years, he was powerless, reduced to silence by the very person he mocked and underestimated. Around him, his gang sat defeated, their bravado shattered by the loyalty and skill of 2 dogs and the determination of the woman who led them. When the distant wail of sirens finally broke through the night, relief washed over Sarah. But it wasn't just relief for herself. It was knowing that justice would be served, not just for her but for everyone who had ever been intimidated or threatened by these men. And as the flashing lights drew nearer, she glanced down at Titan and Luna, pride swelling in her chest. They hadn't just protected her. They had proven once, and for all that teamwork, trust, and courage could overcome even the toughest odds. The arrival of law enforcement vehicles shattered the tense silence, their flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Officers poured out of the cars, their weapons drawn as they quickly assessed the scene. Razor and his gang, still sprawled on the ground under the watchful eyes of Titan and Luna, looked even more defeated as handcuffs were slapped onto their wrists. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, some muttering curses under their breath, but none dared to resist. Sarah stepped forward, her posture calm and composed, to brief the officers. She handed over the footage she'd recorded earlier, along with detailed observations about the crates and trucks parked nearby. "These men are involved in illegal smuggling operations," she explained, gesturing toward the warehouse. "I suspect those crates contain contraband, weapons or drugs, based on how carefully they've been handling them." One of the senior officers nodded, immediately ordering his team to search the area. As they opened the crates, it became clear that Sarah's suspicions were correct. Inside were stacks of firearms and packages wrapped in plastic, likely containing narcotics. The evidence was damning, leaving no room for Razor and his gang to wriggle free of responsibility. When confronted, Razor clenched his jaw tightly, refusing to speak, but the look in his eyes said it all. He knew this was the end of the road for him and his crew. As the officers led the bikers away, Razor paused briefly beside Sarah. His voice was low, almost grudging, as he muttered, "You played us good, soldier girl. Guess we underestimated you." He glanced at Titan and Luna, who stood proudly by Sarah's side, their ears perked and tails steady. "And your dogs. There's something else." Sarah didn't respond with triumph or gloating. Instead, she simply replied, "It's not about proving anything to you. It's about doing what's right. For everyone." Her words carried a quiet strength that seemed to hit Razor harder than any insult could have. He dropped his gaze and allowed himself to be escorted into the back of a police car without another word. News of the bust spread quickly. Locals who had once whispered behind Sarah's back now approached her with admiration and gratitude. At the diner where Razor's gang used to intimidate patrons, the owner shook Sarah's hand warmly, thanking her for standing up to the troublemakers. "We've been scared of those guys for years," he admitted, "but seeing you take them down like that, you're a hero around here." Even the regulars at the diner chimed in, raising coffee mugs in her honor. One elderly man leaned over and patted Titan's head, saying, "Never thought I'd see the day when a couple of dogs would teach those bullies a lesson. Well done, boy." Titan wagged his tail slightly, clearly enjoying the attention, while Luna sat regally beside Sarah, her golden eyes scanning the room as if keeping watch. Back at base, Sarah received praise from her commanding officer, who commended her quick thinking and bravery. But for Sarah, the real reward wasn't recognition. It was knowing she'd made a difference. She spent the evening debriefing with her team, reviewing the events of the night, and ensuring all loose ends were tied up. Throughout the conversation, she couldn't help but glance at Titan and Luna, who lay curled up at her feet. Their loyalty and skill had been instrumental in bringing Razor's gang to justice, and she felt an overwhelming sense of pride in their partnership. That night, as Sarah prepared for bed, she reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the taunts, the threats, and the danger she'd faced, and how she'd refused to let fear dictate her actions. More importantly, she thought about the lesson she hoped others would take away from the incident. That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about moving forward despite fear. And sometimes, having the right allies, whether human or canine, can make all the difference. As she turned off the light, Sarah smiled faintly, listening to the soft breathing of Titan and Luna sleeping nearby. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new patrols, and perhaps new dangers. But one thing was certain: wherever life took her next, she wouldn't face it alone. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's story became something of a legend in the small rural community. People who had once dismissed her as just a woman trying to play soldier now spoke of her with admiration and respect. The diner where Razor and his gang used to loiter transformed into a place of warmth and safety, its patrons laughing freely without fear of intimidation. Even strangers passing through town heard whispers of the brave K9 handler and her fearless dogs who had taken down one of the most dangerous biker gangs in the area. Sarah didn't seek out the attention, but she couldn't avoid it either. Everywhere she went, people stopped her to thank her or share their relief at finally being rid of Razor's crew. Some even brought treats for Titan and Luna, which the dogs happily accepted with wagging tails. It was strange and humbling for Sarah to see how much of an impact she'd made. She hadn't set out to be a hero. She'd simply done her job, relying on her training, her instincts, and the unshakable bond she shared with her dogs. But the changes weren't limited to the townsfolk. Within her unit, Sarah noticed a shift in how others treated her. There had always been respect for her skills, but now there was something more, a deeper acknowledgement of her strength and determination. Her fellow soldiers often joked that no one messed with Sarah Hayes unless they wanted to face the wrath of Titan and Luna. Even commanding officers from neighboring units requested tips on handling high-pressure situations, inspired by her calm demeanor under fire. For Titan and Luna, life returned to its usual rhythm of training sessions, patrols, and plenty of playtime. They thrived on routine, but Sarah could tell they were prouder than ever of their roles. Titan seemed to strut a little taller during morning runs, while Luna's golden eyes sparkled with even more intensity when given commands. To anyone else, they might have looked like ordinary dogs, but to Sarah, they were extraordinary partners who had proven time and again that loyalty and teamwork could overcome any obstacle. Still, Sarah knew better than to let success go to her head. Life as a K9 handler was unpredictable, and there would always be new challenges waiting around the corner. Razor's arrest hadn't solved every problem in the region. There were still smugglers, criminals, and dangers lurking in the shadows. But what the incident had taught her was resilience, the ability to stand firm in the face of adversity, no matter how overwhelming it seemed. One sunny afternoon, Sarah decided to take Titan and Luna to a quiet meadow just outside town. It was a rare day off, and she wanted to give them, and herself, a break from the constant grind of patrols and missions. As they bounded through the tall grass, chasing each other and rolling in the dirt, Sarah sat on a fallen log, watching them with a soft smile. For all the chaos they faced together, moments like these reminded her why she loved her work so deeply. She thought about Razor and his gang sometimes, not with anger, but with a sense of closure. Their downfall wasn't just about justice. It was a reminder that actions have consequences. Had they chosen a different path, things might have ended differently. But Sarah also knew that part of her role was showing people, even those who strayed, that accountability mattered. And if standing up to bullies and protecting innocent lives meant earning a few scars along the way, then so be it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah stood up and whistled for Titan and Luna. They came running, their tongues lolling happily as they waited for her next command. Together, they walked back toward the truck, 3 figures moving as one against the backdrop of twilight. Whatever lay ahead, whether it was another patrol, another confrontation, or simply another quiet moment like this, Sarah knew she was ready. With Titan and Luna by her side, she felt unstoppable. Not because they were invincible, but because they trusted each other completely. And in a world full of uncertainty, that trust was the strongest weapon of all.